As some of you know, I've announced my retirement from the church, and so this is going to be my last video. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoy this one, and I hope to see you all real soon. So when our son was in high school, Tyler, he played baseball, and we took a trip to Memphis for a tournament. And Memphis is, of course, the home of Elvis, and Graceland is there. And I went by Graceland, did the tourist thing. I begged Tyler to go. He didn't want to do it at all. He said, "Dad, I don't like Elvis." I said, "What? What's wrong with you?" I think I should be content that he loves the Beatles, he loves James Taylor, and he loves Andy Griffith's show reruns. So I think I've done something right with our son. They call it a generation gap. You know what I'm talking about. Parents like the style they grew up in, the music and the clothes, and the kids today like their music and their style. I grew up in the 60s, and if you want to talk about some ugly clothes, look at some pictures from the 60s. And I can't believe I liked that stuff back then, but that stuff was ugly. But our music was really good. And our son Tyler, he likes 60s music, except for the king of rock and roll. But I'm really trying to hard, with Natalie being a teenager now, of course, to listen to her music and to like her cars and her clothes and her style, the things about her culture that she loves. I'm trying to really hard to like that myself. Speaking of cars, boy, we had a generation gap with the car I had back when Tyler was in junior high. I was driving a Buick LeSabre. Tyler said, "Dad, only old people drive that car. Why are you driving that car?" None of his friends' parents drove a Buick LeSabre. He was kind of embarrassed by it. In fact, so embarrassed, I take him to school in it. He wanted me to drop him off in Heard County. He said, "I'll walk, Dad. I don't want to be seen in that car." He hated that car. And he prayed that it would disappear. One day his prayers were answered by a college student who Tboned me going down the street from the church. And as we waited for the police to come, I assured that young lady that it's just a car, don't worry about it. And I said, "My son would like your autograph because you've done something that will make him very happy." When the insurance company said totaled, he had a big, big grin on his face. So it's a generation gap for sure. Jesus came into the world at a certain time. It happened to be the first century. I'm not sure he really loved that culture. There's a lot about the first century culture that was horrible. And I don't know why it is, by the way, that Christians and churches seem intent on trying to copy the first century. The only thing about the first century I want to copy is the life of Jesus Christ. So I don't think Jesus loved his culture, but he adapted to it, for sure, so he could reach people. As Christians, we're not to love the world, as you know, but to be a light to it. So I'm determined with my children, not to talk about the good old days. I have never done that with them. For one, the good old days weren't as good as we remember. As the late Will Rogers once said, the good old days ain't what they used to be, and probably never were. But a second reason is the good old days weren't good for everybody. At the time, I didn't know that. But for many people in our culture, those good old days, they weren't good at all. It wasn't fair and just to them. So if we want to reach our culture and our kids, then we shouldn't automatically just condemn everything about our culture. There are things I don't like about it, for sure. And I try to speak out about that. But there are things about our culture that I do like that are good and healthy and wholesome. So if we want to reach our culture and our children, then we should not automatically condemn it, or certainly not condemn our children. If we do, then the generation gap will become a chasm.